opposed to a section of the country simply means you are disfranchising the people, because if the votes count, why and how can you decide that a kind of a particular region of the country should emerge as a winner? So these are issues. So we know, if we're honest with ourselves, but the problem we have is this: sometimes if you belong to a political party, a section of the country, and you want to advocate or push for electoral reform, they do not see from the lens of logic, but from the lens of politics.
Now, still staying there with you, do you see the current leadership in the country, the executive, the National Assembly, with that will to pass this bill by the end of the first quarter of this year? And if passed, do you see the political will on the part of the executive to sign this bill into law?
I wouldn't want to be too pessimistic. I want to look at beyond even signing the bill into law to actually effecting and actualizing and implementing the bill. Nigeria is said to be one of the countries with most of the fantastic bills, fantastic policies and structures, but enacting and acting on those bills, on those policies, that is where the question is. So I'm not really afraid whether the ruling class will say, finally, let's enact the bill. So what happened with the petroleum bill? That's not the issue. But at the end of the day, are we going to ensure we go with the letter and the spirit of the bill?
Now, that will, of course, have to do with how INEC is handicapped if we do not pass this bill into law. But let's understand something. What are the implications of these amendments to the 2023 elections in terms of if passed into law and if not passed into law?
One, if passed into law, it will close up certain windows for electoral manipulations. It will equally close up certain windows for a lot of agitations. It will equally open the window for more inclusion. It will equally open the window for Nigerians, even in the diaspora, to participate in the electoral process. It will equally help us to emerge or be in tandem with development globally when it comes, because Dr. Clay mentioned the issue of electoral voting. But we'll have a problem in the last election where we saw the corridors malfunctioning. Where we equally saw the political actors conniving with the INEC officials to ensure that certain technological instrument or voting instrument electrically were not transmitted to certain regions of the country. Also saw the issue that emerged post the presidential election between Atiku and the president, where Atiku claimed that he has certain information, and the president said no. INEC came and said we did not transmit the result electronically. So we see all this. So one, let the bill be passed. That's a good start. Secondly, the political actors must be willing to allow the letters and the spirit of the bill to be in effect. But we must equally say, and we want to appeal, that the political actors must not dictate and influence those that emerge as INEC officials, because INEC is equally a very key player in the implementation of the proposed electoral bill if passed into law.
Now let's look at the other side of the coin before we make our listener a part of the conversation from the phone line. Said Dr. Clement, he has talked about the implication of passing the bill into law, the implementing it, the benefits it will bring. What about if we choose not to pass the bill before the next general election? What are the implications?
Now, if we do not pass the bill, automatically we have raised the fears that the bill was supposed to address. You realize that one of the things that brought about agitation for reforms has been election violence, and they are also associated with vote buying. How do you make the individual to vote his mind? Because electoral reforms are supposed to help bring about the true expression of the citizens' desire towards choice of who leads them and who does not lead them. Not being voted is like saying, well, we don't want you. Being voted should actually reflect that we want you. But you have a situation where it doesn't really happen that way. And you see, sometimes one of the institutions that bears the brunt is the judiciary. You see, in this country, we've heard of how a senior electoral officer engaged on ad hoc basis said he was asked to sign the result at gunpoint, what we say at durex. So how do we address all of this? Is it possible that at the time of voting, there could be credible means to accept the result before it comes from a point where it is doctored? And we've seen situations where results are won in courts and not at the polls. And so, like Dr. Des said, when there is a reduction in litigation, it shows that the process was smoothly done. It was done according to the rule. So should we not have the reform that are being proposed passed, we are going to heighten and reduce the credibility that goes with the election. And so we need to look inward and have a document. Again, Nigeria is not a standalone country. In the global sphere, documents that guide processes are regarded as important instruments towards achieving a process. So if we do not have electoral reform that reflects the yearnings of the people, then automatically whatever we do or purport to do is not in line with what should be done. Because again, election also have global best practice. No wonder we have election observers. And we too have also been observers. Again, when there is a wide gap between what the observers say they see and what the local observers accept happened, is also a serious indictment on our processes. But again, let us not forget that election matters everywhere comes with a lot of problems. We could have thought that the US, for instance, has come of age after over 200 years of practicing democracy. But here we are in an attempt to practice civil rule, because at some point it doesn't seem as if we are practicing democracy yet. Otherwise, one person will not make a choice of who becomes what in certain circumstances. So as we move towards practice of democracy from the civil rule that we have all imbibed, the need for documents that shows processes, we should be able to show the mere reflection of the desires of the masses on conduct of election should be in place. And once it is passed, it becomes an instrument through which election can administer. You know, sometimes INEC cry a lot and say, give us the instrument to work with. Because no matter what we try to do, unless there is a supporting document, then our act cannot be supported thereafter. So if you don't have these reforms done early enough and reviewed and maybe subject to public hearing, you might be increasing the fears of people. And again, if that doesn't happen, it's also possible to believe that maybe government itself is not ready to accept the will of the people as expressed through election. So there is need for the bill to be passed so that we can reduce and now earn the confidence of the people and maybe step up our our election process and our democracy to develop beyond where it is right now.
In case you're just tuning in, it's Community Views on 101.1 FM. This morning we're looking at the need to amend the Electoral Act before the next general election. That's in the light of the recent activities by the umpire, the Independent National Electoral Commission. Yesterday met with stakeholders in the polity to push for the creation of more polling units. Let's take a short time to tell you about some stats that you need to know and what the INEC chairman said. Now, while INEC is proposing that creation, Professor Yakubu that heads INEC said the last time polling units were created was 25 years ago. And he said that he is of the opinion that the inadequate number of polling units in the last 25 years have contributed to voter apathy and a dwindling voter turnout. And he said Nigeria has continued to maintain 119,973 polling units since 1996, where the country had about 50 million registered voters. The figure has remained the same even when the numbers of registered voters have risen to over 88 million currently. And he said, unfortunately, the last time polling units were established 25 years ago by the defunct National Electoral Commission of Nigeria, NECON, there were 120,000 polling units to serve a projected population of about 50 million. He has said a lot about the stats, that today the number of registered voters stands at 84 million, and that is set to rise after INEC has resumed the continuous voter registration CVR ahead of the 2023 general election. It says yet the number of polling units remaining the same, that the biggest category of registered voters on INEC's database, that is between age 18 to 25 years, were not even born when the current polling units were established 25 years ago. We'll tell you more, but there's something as he made that address. The chairman of Inter-Party Advisory Council, IPAC, Leonard Zenwa, who responded on behalf of the political parties after commending INEC, stated a concern, and this brings me to my guest, Dr. Desmond Okocha. He said that he wished the process had commenced earlier than now. So it raises a question: do we have the time between now and 2023 to see through these proposals by INEC?
As the background to the discussion, if we are willing and there's a political will, there's enough time to get that done.
Between now and 2023.
But you will understand there have been a lot of, with documentary evidence, where even when we have the existing number during the election, we've seen where political office holders' residents are being used as polling units. So that's it's not just we appreciate as academics. We wish and will that we have hundreds of thousands of polling units, but that it should not just be on paper. When it comes to election, they should go by the details of the document, not a situation where you have polling units in political office holders' compound,
traditional rulers,
palaces, where we have them. Sometimes you see these talks, we see instances where there are even ballot box snatching, and then at the end of the day, let's not be a bit cynical. Let's take in the north, for instance, Borno, Yobe, Adamawa. There is insurgency, there is banditry, and the hoodlums and whatever is going on there. But when it comes to election, they seem to have more polling units. They seem to have more votes that are counted.
They seem to have more people coming out.
So the question is, where are they coming from? Some of those places have been corridored by the military. Other places have been invaded and taken over by the bandits and the Boko Haram. And that tells us technically that there are no persons in those areas because they are more like militarized zones. But when it comes to it, so it's not an issue about having thousands and thousands of polling units. It is the effectiveness of the press. So I am advocating personally that I do not just want to see bills and documents. I want to see a government that is willing to ensure that the country and the processes are effectively implemented.
All right, let's start making the listener part of the conversation. But when we come back to our studio guest, Dr. Clement, when we'll be looking at some of the proposals by civil society organizations to be included in the Electoral Act. Key among them, that general elections should take place in one day. Another proposal is that the full biometrics for accreditation and electronic transmission of votes. They're also saying pre-election matters appeal should be included. Pre-election, and women and disability inclusion, and then ad hoc delegates elections timing and tenure. But you are to be a part of the conversation now on 090-222-31011. That's 090-222-31011. Once connected, please be very concise yet comprehensive by telling us your name and where you're joining from, and of course engaging on the issue for discussion this morning. Welcome to the program. Nice to have you join us.
Good morning
to you.
I want to say program not talk about the INEC. My own view is that at least the already existing unit and ward across the nation, at least per unit, we seem to have plus and minus 500 people, which means at any time the INEC are distributing ballot papers, they give up to 500 booklets each unit. But the question now is, before for me to create new units or not, are we being able to make sure that in every election we have up to 300 people voting? No, because I've been doing election in my unit for some years now. I've never been out of 500. Hardly you get up to 200 and something. So I think that the sensitization should be carried out to let that. Then the government should do something so that the voters, the electorate will know that there is a reason, there is a necessary for them to go out in a day of election to vote, not only to create unit or create what, the electronic voting will be okay. But as I'm talking to you now, the entire local government, the ongoing new registration number, there is no single center in my local government where the people of the rural area will go and register their NIN number. At least, if it was to be using NIN number to vote, how would go out and vote?
All right, thank you very much. We have to stop right there with that conversation with you. Do well to get back on the program. We'll take a break for the BBC Pidgin Minutes. Stay with us.
This is Planet in partnership with the BBC, and now BBC Pidgin Minutes.
Ulu and Helen with the BBC Pidgin Corona Minute.
Nigeria government don't place 72-hour suspension on Emirates flights from Nigeria.
Inside circular with the Nigerian Civil Aviation Authority released, the suspension are after the airline violate guidelines with the Presidential Task Force on COVID-19 place. The airline don't carry passengers from Nigeria after they use one kind test with government no approve.
Africa will receive nearly 90 million COVID-19 vaccine doses from COVAX for February 2021, and this now according to WHO Regional Director for Africa, Mashidiso Moeti.
The agency notes that the vaccines will come mainly from the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. However, the rollout is subject to the approval of the vaccine for emergency use by WHO.
15 members of Ghanaian parliament and 56 staff members don't catch coronavirus according to local media, where quotes the speaker.
Reports say they don't ask the infected lawmakers and staff to self-isolate while they undergo treatment.
And finally, the South Sudan National Task Force on COVID-19 don't reintroduce 1 month partial lockdown, even as the country don't record increase in cases across the country.
Well, thank you very much for staying with us. 09022231011 and 08176246585 are the numbers to be a part of Community Views this morning. Nice to have you join us. Welcome to the program.
Hello, good morning.
We have you. Good morning.
Thank you, Mr. President and Madam Speaker.
Well, this is not the People's Parliament.
Fidelis is my name.
Oh, Fidelis, welcome.
Yes. I want to comment on this polling unit increment. There is every reason for the INEC to do so. If you look at the apathy, is about the distance from the registration center, those who registered and the polling unit. Like in my place here, Unit 12, in Rwanda, you discovered a big area. Only one polling unit is located. And if you look at the number of voters, registered voters on that list, it's over 1,500. And therefore, 3 units should be appropriate for such a unit like ours. And it will be closer to the people, and voting apathy will be minimized. On the issue of electronic voting, it is very proper because we are of age. There is no need we continue to vote analytically. And again, this server, central server that will accommodate election results, if that server, as promised by INEC, was realized, that election we had today will have been history because the actual winner will have emerged. But immediately after the election, the server disappeared. So it is proper to make it a law that election results will be transferred through server electronically to a national server that can be recalled at any given time. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining the conversation, Fidelis. Good morning. Welcome to Community Views. Nice to have you join us. What's your name? Samuel.
My contribution is that the percentage is not a problem. The problem is our mindset. Because you can recall that the judge concluded the protocol that was signed by the president. You could see that so many leaders are not obeying. Even the leaders, people it is all about that mindset. If we can change our mindset, then we'll be able to conduct ourselves very well. Even though if we have the electoral act, the electoral act, we don't change our mindset, we will not be able to get the results. So the problem of Nigeria is all about thinking that it's all about changing our mindset and then get face and make it face. But if we are not prepared, and I can tell you, we'll not be able to get it right.
Well, thank you very much for joining the conversation, talking about a change of mindset by Nigerians. Welcome to the program.
I want to conclude my statement. God to the young coming back. As I was saying, in my place, as I said earlier, the electronic voting will involve network. The electronic voting, it will involve network. Now it will involve sensitization, whereby the rural area that I come from will know how to use this electronic voting. But up to now, from now to 2023, if the federal government and the INEC want to do a good thing, my own advice, they should go mobilize youth, the young graduates, to go to the rural area and sensitize these people how to use electronic voting when it comes. Then make sure that all the communication network in Nigeria are all over the nation, so that when this kind of program voting is coming up, people will know how to use, and network will not be frustrating. At the end of the day, there will be still case after the election. There will still case in the court challenging and who wins and who doesn't win. So please let the government do the right thing at the right time. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much for joining the conversation. Let's take another one. Good morning. Welcome to the program.
A good one that it will take for more people to know. The voting is a good one too. But how internet friendly are our environment? Are you aware there are some locations in Nigeria that internet activity are still very low? Two, the central server, according to Okola, if it was really used according to them that the last result was changed, it's not true. Even those who presented that view were unable to defend it, where they were asked categorically clear where they got their results for, and they didn't say INEC. Rather, they talk about some experts. And those why am I bringing that? So clear the view, so we cannot mislead people. No, where as the man in your polling unit was transmitted electronically. So if the election result was not transmitted from your polling unit, how did it get to the side? See, these are issues we must work with. Yes, we must go to a system where we have actually voting to accommodate more and also avoid the national bylaw. But that have also not stopped ringing of elections. You saw what happened in the US. They are still disputes. So these are some of the irregularities. But I'm also of the view that card reading should be accepted by the law. So maybe that can also reduce the competing by imaginary people that were not in the polling unit. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for joining the conversation this morning. We'll take a few more and get back to our studio guests here. We have, in case you're just tuning in, Dr. Desmond Okocha, Senior Lecturer, Bingham University, and Dr. Clement Desmond, Dr. Clement Zuwem. Yeah, both names start with the letter D. So we have Dr. Clement Zuwem from the University of Uyo and Dr. Desmond Okocha from Bingham University. Dr. Clement Zuwem is familiar, or you're familiar with him, but Dr. Desmond Okocha is joining us for the very first time, so he needs a bit of introduction. He's from the Department of Mass Communication, Special Advisor on Digital Media and Strategic Communication to Abia State Governor. He's a fellow, Chartered Institute of Commerce of Nigeria, Management and Communication Consultant, and on this program he's a Public Affairs Analyst. Let's leave it at that. A lengthy one, but yes, let's come back to our guests quickly. We will get back to the phone lines for another batch of calls. Now, these issues raised, Dr. Clement, we highlighted a few issues raised by the CSOs. Let's have a proper insight.
First of all, I think not just that these issues are raised, it will be necessary for the electoral umpire to take these issues very seriously. because these are what form the main charter for what comes out to be credible. It's not enough to use technology. It's also important the outcome of the usage of such technology. You know? Now, let me go back to something. The reason why our institutions have to be strong is because of their interdependence. Now, you were talking about preparation for the election, whether it is not coming too late. And I make bold to say that the National Population Commission, for instance, have what we call maps, which contains where people live and all that. Now, with this data from the National Population Commission, which conducted housing and census of buildings and census of people, you can establish the population, and they remain the credible body to conduct census in Nigeria. So the INEC should take advantage of the existence of this body and verify whatever they want to do in terms of location and numbers, and see how it aligns with what they have. It may not be exactly, but it will be a very good guide. The argument is that general elections should be held in one day. Now, it has to do with
what will it change?
What it will likely change is that there were some criticisms of government that when elections were shifted, it was over-militarized. So many people went to one place. You see, over-policing became fraught with suspicion that it may have been done in favor of a particular candidate. Whether rightly or wrongly, it looks like appearance of evil, even if it's not evil in itself. Now, the logistics.
There's also the talk about when we have a presidential election on one day and have gubernatorial election on another day. The outcome of the first held exercise influences.
Has influence, that's right.
The second.
So it may influence negatively. It may not reflect the true desires of the people, because the voters themselves, even in advanced climb, you hear of swing votes. People tend to vote based on the direction that everybody is going, which is a far cry from their real mind, which is not good enough. It doesn't measure your real intention.
And then you talked about logistics.
Now, logistics becomes a little more easier when you have to carry, for instance, ballot boxes of presidential, House of Assembly, and governor to one location. You provide the same security. It reduces the costs of running elections. So this, and it's easier to coordinate. If you get it right with a set of electoral officers, then you have gotten it right with a number of elections. Now you talk about biometrics. Now, we saw some days ago when people were asked to register their national identity number and tie them to their phone numbers. Now, it's a good thing to happen, but let me warn, our stage of development may not be able to handle everything. If in advanced societies like the US, there's still accusation of interference from Russia, then you can be sure that you see our Yahoo boys are smart. Before you click when it goes. So won't there come a time when the central server of INEC is hacked? But again, I'm not saying we should shy away. Technology comes with unintended consequences. So when you realize the risk factor, now you work to make sure you reduce the risk factor. So there is a number of issues. People have raised the issue of network and so on. But I tell you, in this country, quite a number of places are reached through the network. And there are ways to improve it as we progress. So if 70% of our results comes from electronic voting and it is submitted on time, what do you snatch in terms of ballot box when the result is already with INEC? So it will definitely reduce the costs in terms of social costs. Now you talk of voters' apathy. When people see violence at polling booth, they tend to be threatened and they don't want to come out. And so why will you go and get yourself wounded when people do not even understand why they should vote? And some of the people that are wounded have nothing to gain from the elections. And so if there's a means of getting the results in a polling unit as is going on simultaneously, and you get the results received at the server, and there's a way to cross-check maybe by a third party, because our civil society groups should be in the election room to see how the results drop, so that nobody claims that it was being manipulated or doctored. As it drops, you see it. As it drops, you see it, because I think should be flexible enough to accommodate accredited NGOs who will see the process with the clarity and credibility that goes with the process. So if this is achieved, then the essence of biometrics in the first instance would have been justified.
Well, there are more areas there that Dr. Clement Uwem will touch on as proposed by civil society and Nigerians joining the conversation, pushing. Let's go to Dr. Desmond now. As we talk about this technological application to the conduct of election, let's talk about the cost of technology.
Yeah.
Do we have the wherewithal?
I think number one, let's understand that the cost of elections in Nigeria continues to rise. So more that Nigeria's election have become the most expensive in the world.
Even when it's not technologically driven.
It is presently the most expensive in the world.
I think I know where it's coming from. There's also the vote buying. So when you have to buy votes.
Yeah, so you ask yourself, if Nigeria, that is very, very, it's just a fraction of India, a fraction of China, not up to Pakistan, not up to Indonesia, is conducting the most expensive election in the world. 2019 election was 69 billion costlier than 2015 election. And that's a big question. So going biometrically and equally election, one, they will reduce the costs. One. Secondly, it will reduce the issue of the swing voting, because if we vote on Monday for candidate A of APC and the next election is going to be on Wednesday, then I will look at the direction of the vote. Number two, it also reduced thuggery and ballot snatching, because I know that if I snatch the ballot box, it's going to affect all the candidates of that political party, because sometimes they will snatch the ballot box for the gubernatorial candidates, believing that the senator is going to win. So that will reduce the issue of thuggery, ballot box snatching, the cost implication, the security. Because don't forget also, during the Edo election, about 30,000 policemen were deployed to Edo State. What happens to the country? So if we count the election in one day, it will reduce the security breaches and issues in this country, because we don't need to deploy all our military and police and others to a particular state for an election cycle. So security-wise, it will help us. The cost implication, reducing ballot box snatching and the violence associated with elections. So I think that is for that aspect. Then another issue is the point they raise about the pre-election matters appeal. We discovered that they're advocating that probably a year before the election itself, all the delegates should be picked. There should be the elections at all the issues that might emerge will be sorted out, because you've seen what happened in Kogi State, where even someone that did not, how Yaya Bello emerged in his first election, he didn't even participate in the primaries, but you saw him coming up to become the party flag bearer. You saw what also happened in Imo State, and when that also happened, even what happened in Zamfara State. So if we address the issues of pre-electoral appeals and the rest, it gives us room to ensure that whatever matter is of importance will be addressed before the main election. Not where we have in this country now, where we have Supreme Court, governors and the rest, because, and when the court is beginning to decide on elections, most times it disfranchises the people.
Like we saw in Bayelsa State and in some other cases.
Yes.
Now they say elections conducted in polling units, results are now determined by courts across the country. Well, that's another discussion altogether. Let's go back to the phone lines and continue with you. We're still right there with us. For those who are online joining, we're streaming this program on our official Facebook page, and you could go right there and of course get comments in as well. 09022231011 and 0817628565 are the numbers. Good morning. Welcome to Community Views. Nice to have you join us. We do have you. Good morning. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you. Good morning.
Yes. Welcome to the program. Name and location. All right.
I want to know, some time ago, I asked you so please, I want to know why is it, what will happen that INEC is about to also come in? Did you get my question?
You sounded very faint.
Can you be more audible?
Architect created some units during the local government election. So what will it be coincident that INEC is about
Okay. Talking about the created polling units by Akisek for the just concluded local government elections in Akwa Ibom State, and now INEC willing to create more polling units, whether it will be a conflict. Well, that should it should naturally suffice that there will be harmonization of what ARCISEC did with what INEC intends to do. I thank you very much for joining. Good morning. Welcome, Community Views. Nice to have you. What's your name? Go ahead, Ubong.
Point is there has to do with one of the points that I see that even in the United States.
Ubong, you're coming in and out. It's like you're coming in.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I said my point has to do with one of the issues that are we can see that even as developed as the US is, we are struggling with cyber security defenses after the 2016 in the build-up of the last election, Department of Homeland Security was scrambling to adapt to the skills of what we call the hackers. Now, so we have these skilled cyber actors, which is otherwise known as hackers, who can change data remotely, usually probe election infrastructure, can exploit, maybe use it to modify voter with salary. So you have to be careful that in an attempt to solve one problem, you use that one. Use a country like US to adapt to the skill of how prepared are we to do the same. When the Department of Homeland Security, cyber security wasn't even on the radar after terrorism. That's how complex and difficult this is. How is our cyber security? Don't believe there's a full system. Same politicians that are going to talk to nice battle bosses. Take these elite hackers. Some of them are cause great havoc, and we end up living with no chaos than what we already have. Before we adapt this technology, we have to make sure that we have what it takes to manage it.
All right, thank you very much, Ubong. A beautiful contribution, even though we're challenged by the phone lines to, of course, get your thoughts clearly, but we do get a point talking about the challenge of electronic voting and transmission of results, and you've mentioned the US are still battling cyber security challenges. Now, on our official Facebook page is the feed that we have for you live streaming, and there are comments underneath it. From God's Will, it says our government knows what to do, but they don't want to do it due to reasons best known to them. As long as they don't want to do the needful, things will never change. Is it just up to the government? Do the people have a role to play? Is where we're coming back to you, our guests, as we bring this conversation to a close. And Dr. Clement, you will touch on women and disability inclusion, because according to the CSOs, the clauses recommending the inclusion of women are not in compliance with the provisions of the National Gender Policy and Disability Act with respect to the composition of the delegates, and also the conduct of ad hoc delegates election not later than 80 days to general elections, give room for prolonged court cases and pre-election matters. If you look at all of these recommendations and proposals, it touches on every stakeholder, the political party, INEC itself, conducting the process, and of course what the government, the National Assembly will have to do to ensure that we have this. Have we touched really on security, or there are areas that we've not highlighted in all of these recommendations for the amendments?
About social inclusion. We know globally that unless and until a system is socially inclusive, it's not going to bring about real development. And so there's need to, not just in the books, ensure that all persons in the country are represented and allowed to freely participate in elections. Is very important, because we are signatories to several conventions that has to do with social inclusion, and this is one display of that fact that whether or not our signature to those things are being taken seriously. Now you talk about the issue of election. You know, election is related to the conduct of election itself. Security is related to election conduct. If you have a way to bypass violence, then issues of election will be reduced. So that is very important. So that's why we are still bothered about the key elements of how it is conducted. Yes, I agree with the last speaker who raised the issue of the security of our cyberspace. I want to assure you that this nation is a nation that is endowed with human resources. I think we can handle it if we want to. Otherwise, the number of frauds through banks would have been unrivaled. You have banks that are privately owned and are able to keep the security of their investments. So it is possible to do that. Now, you know, Desmond was talking about cost of election. Between 1999 and 2018, INEC received 730.99 billion. These are no little monies. So anything that the reform can do to justify this expenditure, I think it is worth doing and worth doing well. So it is important. And when you clear, for instance, when you clear issues that have to do with political party choice of their candidate, delegates and so on, it reduces the court cases, because some of the cases in court make reference to the procedure that was used in selecting who stands for election and the processes. And you see, sometimes the political class don't helping matters. They use a different system of selection in one state and use quite a completely different selection in another state. It goes back to what the young man was saying. Government and people, the political class, have a lot to do. Let them look at their politics value chain and reduce the number of actors to credible actors who should actually midwife credible elections, for which we need to use as a nation. Because each time our election results comes out, foreign observers come up with information we never like to hear or agree. So it is important that we take these reforms seriously, as being suggested by civil society groups as well as all stakeholders, so that we can have elections that truly reflect. Sometimes people get elected and nobody talks about them because it's believed that it was a stolen mandate.
Closing thoughts, Dr. Desmond Okocha.
Wow, I think in addition to this, it is good to know that we have about 82 plus million registered voters in this country.
Yes.
But when it comes to election, especially the last election, just over 26 million persons voted. That is 34%. That's alarming.
Including underage.
That is really, really alarming. And this speaks volume to the fact that Nigerians are tired. Nigerians are frustrated. Nigerians no longer believe in the credibility of the electoral processes. Another shocking revelation is that this amount that has been quoted by Dr. Clem, there is no accountability from INEC as to how the money was expended.
They conducted elections.
Thank you for all these elections they've conducted. For instance, in 2019, prior to the election, they told us they were going to use biometric, they're going to use a server. But post the election, when the matters came up at the Supreme Court, they said there is no server. Where is the money?
And yet the personnel cost was 191.8 billion. When you are using technology, there is an increase in personnel costs.
So we'll look at that. Another point is this. In this reform, we should also ask ourselves who should be responsible for the appointment or nomination of the INEC chairman. Because once the appointment is done politically by a regime or a ruling party, automatically, psychologically and sociologically, we should know and tell the direction that the appointed individual is going to swing to when it comes to election. So these are all issues that we should be addressed. So in terms of inclusivity, number one, we should ask ourselves, why do we have low turnover during elections? Do we need more of civic education, voters education, and the rest? Number two, sometimes people do not go because they do not have their life secured. How will I want to go and vote when I know that the thugs can come around with the rifles and shoot me and get me killed? Another issue is that when we have elections in just a day, Because somebody comes to vote on Monday and yes, after 2 weeks he has to travel. But if it's just a day, I think it will equally increase the number of voters. And the more people vote, the more it is the voice of the people. So these are issues that we think should be addressed in terms of reducing the cost, one, also accountable. Because until INEC itself begins to account for how it spends our money, they will not be willing or ready to give us credible election. They feel they can quote billions of naira, conduct election, whether it's free or fair, you go to the courts.
Well, thank you very much for coming on the program, Dr. Desmond Okocha. And Dr. Clement Suwem, thank you as always for coming.
It's always my pleasure. I wish we have a very well reformed electoral law so that we can get it right this time around.
There's much you can do until next Saturday. That's a wrap on Community Views. I'm Samuel Williams. Stay locked on 101.1 FM and have a fun-filled weekend.